Welcome back to Chasing
and
Aligned.
Wow.
Hey, welcome back, you guys.
Everyone. Today is a crazy episode. We have an amazing guest. He is amazing. Like, there's no other word, honestly. Beyond amazing.
You're embarrassing me. Thank you.
No, I'm serious. Like, genuinely, I don't even know him for that long. But the time that I do have with him has been incredible. Literally a gift, the way he understands God. I'm just so excited that you guys get to know a little bit about him in this time, and he gets to share all the information, all the things he knows about the Lord. Obviously not everything, but a little taste. And so I'm just super excited.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you're new, this is your first time seeing our face. We are 3 siblings located in San Fernando Valley. We decided to do a podcast and talk about the one thing that is the best thing, which is Jesus and his life. Literally amazing. With that, it shapes our worldview. So we go into different topics and whatever. So welcome. Want to stay tuned. Please subscribe. We don't say that often. The subscribe, the like, the follow. We need to do it more often. But anyways, if you're new, subscribe. Please comment, Tune in.
Grab your drinks, chips or not.
So for those of you saying, okay, well, who is this amazing, great guest? we have with us Justin M. Smith, PhD, professor and chair of the Department of Biblical Studies, Ministry, and Theology at Azusa Pacific University.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you.
For Justin.
Professor.
Thank you.
Wow. Justin.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, those I don't know. It's crazy to kind of gather my thoughts and what I want to say to you because you have a large background, and I'm sure you have so many stories and what has shaped you to get into being a professor, your ministry, and I'm sure there's a lot that goes, beyond just that, right?
Yeah.
So we just want to get to know you, go in there a little more.
Okay. How far back do you want me to go?
Wow. I want to know everything. Why not?
Okay.
So,
I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. So I'm a native Angelino.
Nice.
So
Great.
got a lot of pride. Got a lot of LA pride,
LA pride.
Public school kid.
Wow.
So, went through public school as a kid coming up in Los Angeles. And I did my undergraduate work for the most part at Occidental College in Northeast LA, in Eagle Rock, where I live now with my wife and kids. And I was a religious studies major in undergrad, right? Yeah. So we didn't have biblical studies at Oxy. We had religious studies. So it was looking at religion broadly. And in that time, sort of leading up to that time, I found myself gravitating towards Bible. I knew I wanted to do scripture.
Yeah.
Wow. And I grew up in the church, so it wasn't, I don't think these really amazing, one of these amazing, powerful conversion moments. You know what I mean? Where it's I was living in sin and I found Christ kind of thing. And those are wonderful. Those are wonderful. It's just not my story.
Right.
I was born and raised in the church, stayed in the church my entire life.
That's awesome.
Was baptized when I was about 9 years old. Mm-hmm. My parents, were very intentional about my brother and I going to church. And so when I was getting ready to leave Oxy, though, I knew that I wanted to do biblical studies. I knew I was going to be a professor. That was already sort of aligned in a way.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what I found was a lot of the people I was going to school with, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends, a lot of the people I was in class with, they were searching. That's why they were taking religious studies. Religious studies, filled some GE requirements, but it wasn't a GE heavy department, right? Mm-hmm. There weren't a lot of kids just sort of lining up to do classes because it met a lot of requirements. So most of the people I was in class with, as we talked and as we got to know each other, it just became kind of clear. Okay, you're searching. Well, we all are, right?
Yeah.
And what I found at times was they were not having those kinds of needs met. The sorts of conversations they were having, the kinds of engagements they were having were really wonderful academic engagements, right?
Yeah.
But the pastoral element just wasn't there. And in a way, it probably shouldn't have been there. And by that, I mean, that's not what that place was. that place wasn't like an Azusa Pacific. It's not a Christian institution where the expectation is that the professors are going to be there to guide you through this process, right? So I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I need to be prepared to do this. I need to be able to meet students where they are. I need to be able to, be thinking about the pastoral side of this, that it's not just information exchange. So then I went on and did my MDiv at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena. And then I did a MA in Biblical Languages at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. Right. So I lived in the Bay Area for a few years. And then I did my PhD in New Testament at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. So I was in Scotland for a few years and then came back.
Oh, wow.
But the whole trajectory for me was always thinking about academia through the lens of ministry, that it's a ministry. It is a kind of ministry. To be gearing oneself toward that, to be thinking in that way, to be preparing in that way, and to be hopefully engaging students that way. Now, what's funny is I never thought I would be at APU. I never thought I would be at a Christian institution at all. Yeah. I actually thought I was being called to a secular institution. I thought, hey, Christian institutions are great. They've got it handled. Right. You've got Christian professors at Christian schools. You don't need me. You need me at some of these other schools where we don't have that same presence, right? God had other plans, as God tends to do. So next thing you know, right? Next thing you know, I'm at APU. And I feel like it's been a good fit. I think it's been the right place, but it wasn't, what I had in mind initially.
So with that, I just want to pause for a second. Having that mentality and thinking, going one way and then God was like, no, you had different plans. Yeah. Now that you have been in APU, how long have you been a professor there?
It's funny. I was just thinking about this yesterday. I actually had to do the math. I've been full-time at APU for about 12 or 13 years. Wow. And I was an adjunct for 1 or 2 years before that. So I've been there almost 15 years now.
Almost 15 years.
Yeah,
wow.
In that ballpark,
So has actually being there and being in that institution, did you realize wait, I don't know, I think I was wrong. I think maybe there is people here that... Yeah, it was, and it didn't happen right away. Yeah. I'll be honest, for probably the first 5, 6, 7 years I was at APU, I was looking at the front door. I was going, okay, this is a springboard to something else. Yeah. What opportunity is going to be the next opportunity? How can I position myself for something else? And I don't know, about 7 or 8 years in. So not really, not that long ago. Not that long ago, yeah. Wow.
It sort of hit me. And a lot of it, honestly, came through conversations with students. So there would be a lot of times where students would come and sit in my office and we'd talk about lots of things, right? And I've had a number of students over the years kind of say, why are you still here? Like, how come you haven't left? Wow. And my basic response was, well, if I leave, there's no guarantee that the person that they hire is going to have this perspective or this concern or this care or this approach. And that doesn't mean that the person that they would hire to take my place wouldn't be amazing and wonderful and do great things with students. Yeah. It just wouldn't be me. And that doesn't mean that I'm great and wonderful and all these things either. It just means I bring, each one of us is a unique blend, a unique mix of things, right? And so I bring this particular unique mix and blend and approach. And so it feels like, at least for now, right, just kind of being open to call and move and, how things shift and change, right? As we have all these wonderful plans. And guys, I got you. I see your plans. Yeah. And so it's being open, right, to these kinds of things and saying, okay, this is where I am now. So what does it look like for me to be fully engaged in this season? Yeah. For however long that season is. 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. Maybe I retire at APU. Yeah. And can look back and go, hey, we had a 20-year run, a 30-year run at APU. And this is what we were able to do in that time. Wow. So, just kind of just watching and hopefully being open.
Yeah. And it's crazy because it's like, we're here sitting at this moment. God has aligned our paths to me and be here right now, talk to our audience and have a student, your student right here saying how amazing and how good and that unique blend that you talked about. I'm sure it has, people can see it. And I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad Cassie saw that in you. So guys, hear it, Cassie.
Don't talk me up too much. It's not me. It's the spirit. It's the spirit. It's the spirit.
I took on a theology minor this semester.
You did? Really? You didn't tell me that?
Yeah. So definitely knew all the classes I'm taking, and so if it wasn't for that little decision, I wouldn't.
So that's why you're in this class?
Yeah.
Because you did the minor?
Because I'm doing the minor.
Because you already did your GE.
Else I didn't have to do it.
Oh.
I'm in honors, so I don't have to take general
that's
education.
Right. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. My bad. I had to take the G's.
I know, right? We all did, except for some people.
Stop. No, that's... Anyways, guys, I'm not going to talk about it. But
no, I'm glad you did that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
I love... theology, guys, is a lot, dude. It's a lot.
Let me tell you, Cassie, she's dorming over there, so... My poor little sister left me, and I'm so glad she did, because I'm sure she's going through God is showing her and revealing, being there for other people. But I will say, when she comes home, she's like, Yuli, oh my gosh, it's like, I love Jesus. I love the Bible. I love everything about it, but I am tired. I'm so tired being in these books. Like, I have to read all these books, write these papers. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much, and my head is so fried. Like, you get so much thought. You think about, you learn from other perspectives. You get into all of that stuff. And it's like, sometimes Cassie's like, it's overwhelming. Like, my brain is fried. And I'm like, isn't that amazing how, like, studying something so lovely and so deep, where it's like, I'm fried. Yeah. So it's just like, honestly, last week I was talking to my friend, he's agnostic. And one of the things he's like, dude, Cassie, I take theology, right? Because you're required to go to these classes. And he's like, you guys don't even know what you understand. Like, it's so divided, or there's so many different understandings, and it's so like, I'm right, you're wrong. If you believe in this part, well, it doesn't make sense to this part. It's contradictory, whatever. It's very black and white. Sometimes it's like warm, but even then it's like, are we knowing the right? So it definitely, I mean, we're in a time and an age where it isn't like the beginning of the church, right? It isn't as clear, because there's so many things that are, that affect our influence and the ways that we are literally like pulled left and right without even knowing. Like, this phone, OMG, we're so distracted. I don't even want to, but like, my brain, my attention span, like these reels, like I can't even. But anyways, I literally had to become nothing and humble myself, because it is a lot of information. And it's just kind of, theology is hard. And how do you do that? Like, studying all these things? I know you're like re-establishing your faith. Like, when you discover, like, ask these big questions, wonder these things, but you can easily get lost. So how do you navigate that in your...
It's a good question. I like to think a lot of it has to do with being grounded in faith and relationship at the beginning. I don't think I've found God in my studies. I've come to understand God better in my studies, right? So there's a difference. I think sometimes there's this assumption or this idea that, if you study theology, if you study the Bible, you will find God. And maybe that's true for some. So I'm not going to doubt somebody's journey if that's what it was. That just wasn't my journey. My journey was, I love God. I'm deeply committed to this relationship. I'm deeply committed to understanding God and knowing God better. Yeah. And this has enabled me in some ways to do that. So, but part of it really, honestly, and I hate saying this because I hated hearing this when I was your age. And I hate saying things like when I was your age. Is it, I don't.
No, but it's honest.
Well, but I'm at that age now where I can say when I was your age, right? Which is
that we'll be saying that. I mean,
you will someday, and then you'll reflect back to this moment and you'll laugh because, when I was your age, and people said, well, when I was your age, it always infuriated me. But I will say this: I'm at this point. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm able to look back and be reflective in a way that I couldn't do in my 20s because I didn't have the time and space. I didn't have the lived experience. I didn't have what I like to, a phrase I like to use, which I picked up from as one of these like home repair shows, DIY shows, sweat equity.
Wow.
I like the idea of sweat equity, right? It's the amount of work that you put into a thing, right? I didn't have sweat equity in my 20s. I have sweat equity now, right? I've been putting in the time.
Yeah.
And so again, I think this kind of comes back to some of the things that we've talked about. We see the finished product and we assume that the finished product, you know, comes about as instantaneously as we absorb it. And it doesn't, right? The finished product takes time. And in my case, 20 some odd years. You know, I graduated from high school in 1994. I started doing religious studies in one way or another in 1994. So I've been doing this for over 20 years as a student, as a person of faith, now as a professional, as an academic. So it's hard, I think, when you're trying to do this alongside of all of the other things that you're doing in life. So this is not your major. This is not what you're, you know, dedicating your life to at this moment. So you're living life, you're, you know, doing the day-to-day stuff, you're doing your other classes. And then in the midst of all of that, right, here's all of these really complex things and ideas that those of us who do this for a living, we've spent years thinking about, right? Contemplating, being in conversation about, accepting, rejecting, coming back around, you know, accepting it again, probably rejecting it a second time, you know, accepting it a third time kind of thing. Like it's this interesting sort of ebb and flow of looking over the course of your life and going, okay, at this point I thought this, and then I thought this, and then I thought this, and being in that process and sort of, at least for me, appreciating the process. And I feel like I can do that more now. When I was going through it, did not really appreciate the process or a lot of that process early on, to be honest. Was confused, frustrated at times, angry, you know, how come I'm not getting this sort of thing? And then you get a little bit further along, at least for me, again, and just speak for myself, get a little bit further along and you go, okay, all right, okay. You know, seriously, it's deep breaths, you know, walk away for a little bit, put it down, come back to it. Yeah.
I do love how you mention, like really enjoying and being present in like the process of it and how we'll eventually get to this. Like, let's say this coffee, you guys, just like as a visual, this is good. It's a chai tea, iced latte, oat milk, really good. And I'm just sipping it, enjoying it. But I don't really think about the whole process of how this thing's getting made, from the ground beans, from the farm pickers, the whole supply chain of making this coffee be at my hand. So it's like I guess for me, it's like we're so just, you know, want to sip in my coffee. Oh my gosh, I'm enjoying myself. But, you know, really getting to think the journey of how this coffee got into my hands is probably so much. We'd be here forever to talk about how I got that. So you to where you're at in your life now and being where you're at now and being able to speak wisdom to these college students in their 20s. Just like you said, when I was your age, like I wish you're not like I wish, but more like what you've learned, you know? And I think you mentioned earlier when we spoke, like to give ourselves some grace in that, you know, and I feel like I'm sure there's so many people right now who are in our journeys in the process. I'm sure we're learning each and every day. And I think it's good that you just continue to kind of bring that up because it's true where we can get frustrated, angry, and sometimes walk away. Yeah. And that's not you. That's not your life story. And I'm sure it'll inspire so many other people who want to go into perhaps theology, be the professor, you know, be what you're doing now. And so I think it's a cool thing. It's something that for sure should be, you know, shed a light on, just because we're all in this together. We're trying to figure life out. And I am in my 20s, so it is good to kind of hear everything that you can share to me, because I have so much to learn, and it is good to hear from other people, because, you know, it's just, I can't do this alone. And I really want to focus and shed light more on what you said about that you didn't find God in your studies. Yeah. And I was like, I kind of paused for a second, because I really took that into my mind, and I'm like, wow, because I've heard a lot of people who dedicate their time to God. It's like, yeah, you know, I kind of found God into my studies. I actually started to believe in God in my studies because there was no like, I couldn't disproof out of all of these accounts. Like, it's just so much where you're like, wow, I found God there. But I kind of want to get into that. Like, how, I know you said you grew up and you've always, you know, I love God and I want to go into that. Did you just always feel like the love from God to pursue him as a kid, ever since you got brought up through your family, through your examples, friends? Like, how did that moment of, wow, I love God and I want to pursue learning so much about him and sharing that to others, like, where did that really stem from? Yeah.
That's a good question. I feel like I felt it pretty early.
And that's
life.
Awesome.
I think. I mean, so part of it too, I think, was even just growing up in the church. There was an encouragement. So the church that I grew up in, like, I started presiding over communion when I was like 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
I started being prepared to preach when I was 12 or 13 years old. I started preaching like legitimately when I was 16, 17, 18. I don't really preach anymore now because I think there's better ways to communicate for me personally. I think preaching is wonderful. It's a wonderful skill. I just think there's others that are really good at it. I'd rather do this.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather have conversations. Like, preaching's wonderful, but it's very often like a one-way conversation. I would rather have back and forth, right?
For sure.
So from a pretty young age, I was being encouraged to do the things, right? To do the practices that bring us into closer relationship with God and one another, to be in a position to articulate my faith, to be in a position to talk about what I believe. So that it wasn't this sort of solo journey where I'm sitting down in a room with a bunch of books and I'm poring over these books and I'm trying to find God in the pages. And I know that there's a lot of journeys that are like that. And it also highlights, I think, how we can come to know and understand God in different ways, right? Yeah. That not every journey is exactly the same. It's not a one size fits all. Right? Yeah. So for me, again, just me, like, from a very early age, I feel like, all right. I was having a conversation with a friend one time, and she said to me, she goes, you know, you're a really driven person. I go, what are you talking about? I'm not a driven person. She goes, well, look at these things that you're doing. And I go, yeah. She goes, that's drive. So when you're in it, you don't see it, at least for me. Wow. Like, I don't sit here and think about myself in that way. So when you ask questions like, well, you know, sort of when did it like click for you? When did it happen for you? It's a really interesting question because it's not something I often think about. Yeah. Because I've felt this way for so long that I can't actually remember a time when I didn't feel this way.
And praise God.
Right. So for others, they're like, I've never felt that way. I pray to God that I do get to feel that way. Or I remember specifically like that moment when I felt this way. And so for me, I feel like almost for as long as I can remember, the path wasn't clear, but the goal was, right? So how I was going to get to this thing, not always clear. But the goal, this engagement, this relationship, and it's why I like to talk about this in terms of relationship. It's a relationship that I'm building with God. It's a relationship that we're building with God. And it takes place over years, over decades, right? Just like, you know, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it in class sometimes, right? Yeah. And talk about the intentionality. Yeah. Right? Being intentional on our desire, being intentional in our relationship with God. And so some of us are motivated by our hearts, some of us are motivated by our minds. And so the intellectual pursuit for some is what really needs to be engaged in order to meet God, find God, see God. Yeah. As I've gotten older, what I'm trying to do is be more holistic and allow for more engagement and connection with God, with my heart, with my mind, with my body, with my soul, with all of it, right? Because that was not something I always had. I think for a lot of years it was really taking place up here, right? Yeah. And it wasn't until maybe 10 years or so, maybe less than that, where I really started to open up my heart to engaging God in that way. And some of us are sort of taught to engage God with our hearts to begin with, and it's great. And then some of us aren't. Some of us are taught or even wired that way. Like, I'm kind of more, I mean, obviously I'm an intellectual, I do this for a living, but it's like I'm wired intellectually to engage God. So even just trying to engage God differently, right, with different aspects of my person.
The way you're able to just speak how your mind works, understand yourself well, is just great.
Oh, thank you.
Because I mean, oh my goodness, it's like it takes, like you mentioned, you were once my age, and I'm sure you probably weren't even
Not even close.
not even close. And it's beautiful to see the goal, at least in the outcome of how your mind is now shaped. And
But here's what I would say too. I credit students with a lot of my development and growth.
wow, let's hear that.
Okay, and here's why.
Let's hear it.
So I've said this recently, and I mean this. It feels like each generation is becoming more self-aware. Okay, so my parents' generation not as self-aware as my generation, because they weren't taught to be self-aware. They weren't taught to think about themselves in that way. They weren't taught to understand their feelings or articulate their feelings or to talk through what they were experiencing, right?
That is
Right?
true.
I'm imagining your parents are similar, right? You put your
don't
head
talk
down.
about feelings.
No, you put your head down, you do the work, right?
Yeah, you do what you got to
Like
do.
nobody cares about your feelings.
Right.
Like we all have feelings, great, go to work. Right? Clock in, clock out, come home. What time is dinner? Yeah? Right? Okay. Same thing. My parents' generation, not completely emotionally shut off, but not really processing feelings, right? We got too much stuff to do to process feelings. Now, my generation comes along and we're starting to realize, well, you know what? That's not helpful. We've got all these things that are going on inside of us, whether we're talking about our faith lives, we're talking about our emotional lives, we're talking about how do we have good relationships with others, how do we have good relationships with our children, these kinds of things, right? So my generation then becomes more self-aware as we're starting to think through this. And then your generation is even more self-aware. We have new language, we have new concepts, we have new medical diagnoses. We're talking about mental health in these things in ways that my generation didn't talk about. When I was your age, we weren't talking about depression. We weren't talking about anxiety. We weren't talking about all these things that have become a big part of our conversation. And we weren't certainly talking about them through the lens of faith. Like, what does it mean for people who love God and have faith in God to be depressed, to have depression and have anxiety? Instead, we just read scripture that says, don't be anxious. But that's not what he's talking about. Right?
Don't be anxious.
Don't be anxious. Like,
Don't be
Jesus
afraid.
doesn't like anxiety. I'm like, that's not what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
But we get told that, we get read that because people who don't have anxiety don't know the difference between being anxious and having anxiety. So then they tell you, you have anxiety, that's a sin. I'm like, nah, bro, that's not a sin. It's a mental health condition that I'm working through.
Yeah.
So when students then would come to me and start talking to me about their lives, it put me in a position, I think, to develop a deeper sense of empathy. To say, your life and my life are very different. I will never live this life that you live. I will never fully understand what you're talking about because we don't have the same experiences. So I can either look at you and say, your experiences aren't real, your experiences aren't true, suck it up, put them to the side, go do your work.
Yeah.
Don't let any of these things bother you. Right? Or I can say, tell me more.
Right.
Help me understand better. Share your life. Tell me your story, right? And in that process, as I'm talking with students and listening to students and engaging with students, and they're asking me questions, and every group of students ask different questions. Sometimes I ask the same questions, which is what allows me to be prepared in the classroom, right? I've seen this one coming. I've had this one 10 times. I got this. And then there's other questions, right, that are brand new generation, new questions, new group of students, new issues, new concerns, right?
Yeah.
And so you can either answer and move on, or you can lean in, I think, in some ways to that and go, okay, so what's behind the question too? It's not just what's the question, but what's behind it. And so I think students, just continuing to engage with students has allowed me to become more self-aware so that I can talk, because the stuff that students ask me, it's usually falls in like two categories. One is sort of, how do we read and interpret this passage? And the other part is, what do I do with this in my life? Or like, how do I live my life better? And I'm not a life coach by any means, but I think we can integrate our understanding of scripture in how we live our lives. But if we don't understand ourselves first, right, or at least not in that process, it's going to be really hard to apply scripture. It's going to be really hard to grow in our relationship if we don't understand ourselves. It's kind of the thing I'll say, like, when it comes to being in a relationship with people, I think it's the same being in a relationship with God. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know what kind of partner you are, and if you don't know what kind of partner you need, it's going to be really hard to be in a functional relationship. Yeah. And so if we're thinking about God, right, being in a functional relationship with God, what kind of partner am I to God, right, in this relationship? What kind of partner do I need? Yeah. And what kind of relationship are we hoping to build together?
And I'm honestly, I want to just shout out wifey and daughter you mentioned.
Yes, I have a wife, daughter, and son. So shout out to your family. Thank you.
Because I'm sure they love on you and pour into you. And I'm sure they've tagged along in your journey.
They're better than I deserve. That's what I will tell you.
Wow. And I think it's so beautiful how they, you know, the foundation of just like you mentioned, the importance of like that relationship with a partner or even just like with your family and the people you love so much. How can that reflect your relationship with God?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have a beautiful and wonderful family, hearing from how much you care and kind of even with students, because in my undergrad, in my experiences, you know, professors are very much, it's like, hi, here it is. And then it's a bye, or it's either like, you know, you can come to my office hours. But I see a lot of, in my time, my generation, a lot of students would not, you know, take advantage of those times or perhaps because I know it's very different with private and publics. I understand, but I think it's not like an excuse not to go ahead and talk to these professors and like, you know, learn more. And I feel like I'm not perfect. I'm sure I fall guilty in this of not taking advantage into speaking to these well-spoken professors. I've had a lot of really well professors and, you know, some that I've seen just, you know, so I just wanted to kind of just shout out your family, you know, and because I'm sure I don't know, it's great, good to hear a little bit how your mind is. And I'm sure, obviously no family's perfect, but I know that I'm sure
we have our good days and bad days.
Of course.
And then we try to, what I hopefully try to do is if we have a particularly bad day, is to wake up the next day and talk about it.
Yeah. Wow.
And say, hey, we had a bad day yesterday. The day did not end, or the day did not start, or the day in the middle was not the day that we wanted.
Yeah.
So how can we do better today? So
that's awesome. I'll take that in.
Right. So like, I won't raise my voice today, guys. And what are you going to do? Oh, we're going to listen better, Dad. Like, great. Wow. Let's do that. Let's do that. Right.
I could cry, honestly. I just got engaged, and I would love to have a family. And right now, obviously, we're in our 20s, and
take your time.
We take our time, and of course, it's something just like beautiful to see. Just how it's good to hear how you can. There is issues, but the next day, like you mentioned, go ahead and.
I think just owning your stuff is just really important, and it's a really important thing to teach your kids, right? Like if you aren't accountable for what you do as a parent, how are your kids going to learn accountability? Yeah. So if you want to hold your kids accountable and say, all right, here's the things that we wanted you to do today, and you didn't do those things, and here's, you know, the repercussions. But if as a parent you're not getting it done, but you don't hold yourself accountable,
lead by example.
Yeah. So if you're not doing that, right, then how is it then? So it's modeling, right? So coming back to the modeling part. So I'm here today because my wife is taking my son and daughter to go have pictures with the Easter Bunny. So she got them out of the house. Sweet. So she's doing stuff with them so I can be here.
That's so sweet.
Because the weekends are usually, you know, the four of us running around doing wild stuff.
We appreciate that.
Wild stuff for 6 and 4-year-olds, whatever that is. So, I'm happy to be here.
So I have a question. I want to take it like to the classroom.
Yeah.
So teaching like the subject matter you want, theology or biblical studies.
Yeah.
What are like the different ways you see like students digest that information, or like because I'm sure it's everything, like they're all individuals and I'm sure they're all respond to it or take it in differently.
Yeah.
Do you ever see like God working through that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So like maybe like touch on that one.
So I think one of the things for me that's really important from a pedagogical perspective, from a teaching perspective is, and this is going to sound, I don't know how this is going to sound, but I'm really mindful about assignments. It doesn't seem like it probably to you. Maybe it does. I don't know.
You are.
Okay.
You are.
So I'm really intentional about assignments. And the idea is, and again, I say this on day one, I want there to be assignments that everyone can excel at. And then there's going to be assignments that will challenge you, right? And not everyone will excel at. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to assign students reflection papers, and they're going to write about 10 reflection papers over the course of the semester. And what that does is it gets me a chance to know students. So in this particular class that Cassie and I have, there's 25 students, give or take. And that's not a huge class by any means. You know, I know in some institutions you'll have like 500 kids in a lecture hall.
Plus.
Yeah. I don't teach classes that big. APU is just not set up that way for the most part. But even in a class of 25, it is hard to get to know 25 people.
Yeah.
Right? Like at a relational level. So one of the things I like to do is to do a reflection paper and to see this journey. And I ask students to reflect on their reflection papers. So one of the assignments is you're going to write 4 reflections, and then the 5th one is a reflection on the first 4. And then you're going to write 4 more, and then the 10th paper is a reflection on the other 9. Because what I find most often, and this kind of goes back to your question about sort of how students engage and when they engage and what they how they appreciate or don't appreciate or understand or don't understand the classroom space, right? Yeah. For most of us, we see classes as something to start, finish, get a grade, move on to the next one, right? So it's a series of tasks to complete for whatever reason. So maybe for your general education portion, maybe for your major, so that you can get your degree, you can graduate and go on to whatever. And it's almost always the case that I've seen over the years that students rarely stop and think about what they've actually learned over the course of 15 weeks.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
You may remember there was something my professor said in this one lecture that was great, or I have this wonderful set of notes, or I remember reading this one book, or I remember this topic or this discussion, or I remember how hard this exam was. I feel like a lot of our stories are like that. Like, oh man, I spent all night, studying for this exam and, crammed for this thing and that. Right. What was on the exam?
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't tell you that. Right. What did you learn in that class? Couldn't tell you that. Right. But could tell you about like the feelings and the emotions and the things that went into it, or like you're studying with people. Right. So what I'm encouraging students to do is then to look back over this journey of 15 weeks.
Yeah.
Who were you at the beginning of this class? Who are you at the end of this class?
Well.
Who were you in the middle of this class? Who are you hoping to be once you leave this class? And what it gives me then are opportunities to engage with students and to offer them an invitation to come to office hours.
That's nice.
So you write something in a paper and I read it and I go, oh, that's interesting. I don't want to respond to your paper in the little bubble on Canvas that they get in the comment section, right?
Yeah.
This is more important than what I could write in the comment section. This is really interesting. Come see me during office hours. And then students get freaked out when I say, come see me. Because they always assume it's bad.
They're like, oh gosh.
Like, what did I do?
Hours. What did I do?
I'm like, trust me, if you did something bad, I'm not going to leave it hanging. I'm going to say, we have an issue. Here is the issue. Let's sort it out. Right? Yeah. Like, hey, your paper got flagged for AI. Yeah. Tell me your story. What happened here?
That's sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Let's continue that because AI. Yes. Wow, I want to.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yes, I will tell you my feelings about AI.
Okay.
No, there's no process happening there.
Short story. I don't like it. Okay. But we'll get back into it.
Okay.
So for me then, it's recognizing that some students are going to be stimulated intellectually. Yeah. So making sure that we are doing the things in the classroom, that I'm offering you the readings, I'm offering you the lectures, I'm offering you the information that will be intellectually stimulating, right? Other students are stimulated emotionally or artistically. So one of the things I do in this particular class is I provide students with a playlist. And I say, when you're doing your reflections, here's a playlist that you can listen to. Here are songs for the week that kind of connect directly and indirectly to
Which
what we're
I
talking
love.
about.
Wait, you see that? Okay, now I know why you're so awesome, amazing. Like, oh, are you kidding me? That's like awesome.
Incorporating like all the senses.
Yeah.
It's really like, because not everyone learns just the same way, just PowerPoint or
Right.
Read this and then write a paper on it.
No.
You got music, you have stories, you have visuals. And then for those students who need that more to really take those things in and like to think about them, it's going to do wonders for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really trying to meet students where they are and saying, again, the educational experience is not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And this is a reaction to my educational experience.
Yeah.
Because my educational experience was one size fits all.
Yeah.
My educational experience was come in, sit down, I'm going to lecture as the professor, you're going to take notes. This is when the exams are. This is when the papers due. Office hours are from these days and these times.
You're explaining my experience.
Right. Okay. And so if you want, if you want to come during office hours, you can. I'm available.
Right.
And there would be discussion, right, in classes. It's not like I never had discussion in class.
Right.
Yeah, there would be discussion, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also one of the reasons why I tell my students, like, our class is an hour and 25 minutes. And I know you may not agree with this, but nobody wants to hear me talk for an hour and 25 minutes, especially at 8:45 in the morning.
And with this time, I mean, with our, what is it called? Our attention span. Yeah.
The average human being, their attention span, adult attention span, is about 45 to 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do? About every 10 to 15 minutes, we're breaking into small groups. We're having discussion. We're processing. We're coming back and talking about it.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? I know what I think. I've been doing this a long time. I'm not interested in what I think about the topics.
Wow.
I know what I think. Who cares?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
How are you processing this? How are you understanding it? And then what that does is it opens up space in the classroom then to say, okay, so we clearly need to process this more or better or differently in the classroom. How do we want to process this here? See, you're getting to see the secret sauce right now. Like, I don't talk about my process with you guys.
No, it's literally it's such a reflection to your relationship with Christ too, because He knows that we learn in all these ways.
Right.
That's why He literally came in flesh and was like, let me just show yourself
Yes.
directly. And also the Bible, like, we have songs, we have stories, we have parables, we have all these type of ways, right? We hear God.
Right.
There's so many ways we can experience and understand. And it's kind of the same idea of like this process.
Right.
And so, yeah, Jesus being our teacher,
Right.
direct
Right.
example, reflection on how you teach. And that's so beautiful.
So this is what I was saying to you guys the other day. I'm like, we don't give Jesus enough credit
Wow.
as a teacher.
Wow.
Like, we credit the content, but we don't credit the pedagogy.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're like, we were talking about the Sermon on the Mount. I'm like, this is a masterclass in communication. It's
Understand.
Not, right.
Okay?
It's not just, oh, look at how wonderful all of this is. And isn't this great information? I'm like, look at how this is laid out.
Yeah.
Look at how He does His work.
Yeah.
Look at how He teaches. Oh, Jesus teaches in parables. That's interesting. It's not just interesting. It's an amazing approach to teaching, storytelling through storytelling. I would imagine if we sat around right now and I said, okay, what story from the gospel or what part of the gospel do you remember the most? And within a few moments, probably most of us would say something about a parable. Prodigal son, Good Samaritan.
Yeah. Feeding the 5,000.
Well, that's not a parable.
Oh, that's not a parable. Sorry.
That actually happened. Depends on who you talk about. But no, like any of the stories, right?
Yeah.
Lost sheep, lost coin, lost son, right? All these things.
Yeah.
Storytelling as human beings is what we do, right? We tell stories. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're really good at telling stories. Sometimes we tell stories with our lives. Sometimes we tell stories with our art. Sometimes we literally tell stories, right? Mm-hmm. And so from a teaching perspective, I think it's just really important to try to engage students as much as you possibly can. And honestly, I'll be honest, some of it is a little bit selfish. It helps keep me interested.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I'm interested, you're interested.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. If you've ever been in a class with a professor who was like really fired up about what they were teaching, it didn't matter what the subject was.
Now I want to learn it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you come in and your chemistry professor is just on one and just excited And look at these wonderful things. Look at these reactions and these things we're doing today. Look at these chemical compounds, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, man, it's chemistry, bro. But they're excited.
Yeah.
Then you're kind of like, you know what? Not everybody in the room's going to buy in, but you have a much better chance of buying in.
It really
Like, why is this person so excited about chemistry? Like, I want to know.
And you know what, though? You're bringing me back to my days, because I had a professor he was retired, but he was the chief of Nestle, something. Yeah, the chocolate.
Nestle.
Nestle. Okay, there you go. Oh gosh, he was the retired chief of the supply chain there, and he comes in and he's like, "This is my first class teaching ever at this university." And he was just like, "I'm super excited." Of course, he's going to be excited because it's like his first class, but I guess I've never really been with a professor in their like most excitement, like very much engaging, like, you guys, this is so good to learn. I'm so passionate about this that I'm retired and I want to teach and give that back to you guys. So, this is X, Y, and Z. But I think over the years, like you mentioned, 15 years teaching at APU, it's like you try to keep yourself at somewhere around, I'm sure there's days where you're like, okay, but I guess
tell him that too.
He does.
I tell him.
He does.
That's awesome.
I'll tell him, I'm like, okay, so one of the things I started doing during COVID that I thought was really helpful, and then I've carried it post-COVID, is attendance. So it's like the dumbest thing you would think of in a classroom is like, why are you intentional about attendance?
Yeah.
Well, that's another way I get to know students. So when we do attendance, I either ask them a question for the day, which means everybody goes around the room. When I do attendance, they have to answer the question. It can be something simple like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite book? What are you watching or listening to right now? Or even things like sometimes, what's on your heart today?
Oh,
and it gives students a chance, and I'm like, interpret that however you want, right?
Right.
And then sometimes I'll say, okay, you guys get to ask me a question today. And so we'll go around the room and students will ask me questions, right? But I think for me, there's an intentionality from day one. And I will say some days I'm like, you know what? I was driving in today and I didn't really want to be here. But then I saw you guys and you had good energy at 8:45 in the morning and it's inspiring me to like want to do this thing. So let's do this thing, right? Yeah. I think being able to be honest about what is working and what's not working is really important. And I think, you and I've kind of had these conversations a little bit about the way that we project our faith as sort of like either kind of falling into one or two categories, kind of the way we talked about it, which is like either you're just completely broken or everything's perfect. And I think most of us exist some space in between. Like, this is broken. I am broken. This is what brokenness looks like. Like, brokenness doesn't always look like rock bottom, whatever we envision that to be. Mm-hmm. Brokenness looks like a 50-year-old dad and husband who teaches biblical studies for a living and is sinful and is in as much need of grace as any of us. And is working really hard to be a disciple and failing at it miserably, but not giving up and going, it's a process. I'm trusting God. I'm trusting the process, right? But being able to own that and talk about that and not project this idea that discipleship is only discipleship when it's perfect. Wow. Discipleship is discipleship when it's imperfip.
That is
right?
so good.
Come on.
I'm just saying, it's just like, that's what it is.
Here.
It's and the grace part, right? So it's like, we're wonderful about leaning into God's grace. Like, I need God's grace and God forgives and so on. And we give ourselves no grace. We give ourselves no grace, right? We know that God is calling us to something that approaches perfection, right? And we're willing to sort of accept that God knows that we're probably not going to be perfect, but we're not willing to grant us that same thing. Like, we're holding us to this standard of perfection in our discipleship when we know that God knows that we can't. Yeah. But we still are saying we have to do this and be perfect. And if I'm not, then I'm not being so I think just, but also then holding that intention and not just being terrible for the sake of being terrible and going, well, God's grace is enough. It's like, well, no, do better. But then also recognize that as we're trying to do better, we're going to be incomplete. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of that process.
That's always so hard for me. Like, you are fully redeemed, you are perfect in Christ, but also he's going to come back. Like that's still in the works. Like,
Well, but I think, okay. So we talk about in like biblical studies and theology, this idea, or this concept of the already and the not yet, that we live in the tension of the already and the not yet. The kingdom of God is already here. The work of the kingdom has already begun. Jesus has already begun the redemptive work, but it's not yet complete. Right.
Wow.
Right.
Chills.
So it's the already and the not yet. The kingdom is here, but it's not finished. Hence why he's coming back. He's coming back to complete the thing that he started. And we have been left here, right, to do the work.
Yep.
We've been left here to be the kingdom of God in the world, right? God put the kingdom in motion, right, with Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus says, I'm leaving. The Holy Spirit's coming behind me. The Holy Spirit is going to enable you, empower you to do the work. Now go do the work. You know what I like to say? I don't believe in a works-based righteousness, but I believe in an action-based discipleship.
Yeah.
Right? The works don't save us. But if we're called to be disciples, discipleship is a verb and a noun. It's not just who we are or what we're engaged, it's what we do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of us concentrate on the not yet. We don't concentrate enough on the already.
Wow.
It's already happening. It's already here. We're already a part of it. Lean into that part. Let God worry about the not yet. Let's worry about the already and what roles we can play, right, in the already. So
Wow.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Okay. Good.
And that's crazy. Gussie, how are you? Like, hello?
Do you guys understand though? Like I leave his class like, who am I? What is this? What's life? What's da 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 da? But also there's so much peace because he's bold and he knows what he knows and he knows Christ. And like you are fired up in the morning. I'm like, it's 8:45.
It's because it's coffee. I'm well caffeinated by the time I see you guys.
No, but it's like it really is.
Well, if you get
crazy.
to do what you're passionate about, right? It's not work in that way. Like it is work, but it's also not work. Like I get to come in and talk to you guys about Jesus. It's not a bad gig. It's not.
That's a gift. Like,
You know what I'm saying? Like it's not a bad gig.
that's
Like
great.
I know people, you know, who wake up in the morning and they're like, "Oh, my job sucks," and there's things about my job I do not like for sure.
Yeah.
It's not the classroom stuff, by the way. The classroom stuff I generally enjoy. I love it. I get to spend time with you guys.
he's just saying that.
No, for real. He's like, my jaw's on the line.
He's like, no.
Students are trash. No, I really do. Like I enjoy the student part of it. I enjoy getting to connect. I enjoy getting to talk about these things. I enjoy getting to plant seeds.
Yeah.
That's all this is planting seeds. You know, it's saying, here's what I'm thinking at this point. Here's kind of where I am at this point in my life. God has blessed me to see some of these things that people just don't get to see because they don't have the time.
Yeah, and I feel like he's gifted you to have like that heart that will be willing to just listen. Because there's some people that just can't listen. And sometimes that's all they need is for someone to just
Listen.
Prideful,
And so stubborn.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like
Me.
I'm sure. I'm not sure. Over your 15 years, I'm probably very sure that you have made really well relationships with students, and you've given a lot of your time to just even listen. And I'm sure they'll always remember that. You know.
Well, so for me, I've been blessed. My advisor from undergrad, so 25 years ago, he and I still get together on occasion, go for walks.
It's amazing.
Like we walk, we talk, we kind of catch up on what's going on in our lives, what's going on in the academy, those kinds of things. My advisor when I was in Berkeley, she and I still text.
Yeah.
She's retired, semi-retired, moved to North Carolina. We still catch up every so often. My advisor when I was doing my PhD work, he and I get together at least once a year.
Wow.
Right? Catch up, talk, I have students that whenever they're in town, they come by the office, we hang out, we grab coffee, we talk. I've got other students that I talk to on the phone a few times a month, sometimes more. So I think for me, there's the opportunity to pour in students, but I think there's also the opportunity for students to pour back into me.
Yeah.
Which is a blessing, It's like I think students sometimes assume that the exchange is one way, right? That it's the professor who's giving, the professor who's giving, the professors who's giving, right? Students can give too. Like students can pour back in. So like this, what we're doing right now, what you're doing right now, this is pouring back in. This is you saying, we've done some interesting things this semester. You've kind of pointed out some things. I'm seeing things that I haven't seen before. Come and like, let's talk about this. Like, let's flesh this out. That's pouring back in.
Yeah.
That's suggesting to me that what we're doing is good. That what we're doing is valuable, that what we're doing has meaning, that what we're doing goes beyond a series of facts and things that you're learning that you could come back at some point and sort of regurgitate or, present, right? Yeah. You're saying, no, like, this is more than just the academic exercise, which is incredibly important, but it's not the only thing. So this kind of thing is like life-giving. In that it pours back in. I pour out, pours back in, right? So we need that. Because if all we do is pour out, then we're empty.
We're empty.
Right? And that's what a lot of us grow up with. A lot of us grow up with is like just keep pouring out, pouring out, pouring out, pouring out.
Yeah.
Well, you got nothing left to give at some point. You poured out, you're empty.
Yeah.
You tip that jug over, there's nothing coming out. Right? So it's when students pour back in. It's when colleagues pour back in.
Wow.
It's when, my people at church pour back in.
Wow.
That was leading me to like a question I want to ask too. Like you at your level where you're at, like me also as a student, when I go to my professor, like I'm already like, oh, they should be like an expert in the subject or pretty much be able to answer any question. So do you still ever like see or are you ever still learning more?
All the time.
Like there's no way like you've gotten everything.
No, but that's what I think allows me to be a good professor. Because we're learning together. And I can stand up before you and go, here's where I'm at on this issue at this moment. Here's where I was 10 years ago. Here's where I was 5 years ago. Or, hey, I just read this new article. It's blowing my mind. It's making me think about this particular thing in a way that I've never thought about. Or when I do my own research, if I'm writing stuff, if I'm asked to contribute, to a book, or if I'm pitching a book to a publisher, it's not always stuff that I've fully thought through yet. Like, here's an idea for a book that I have. Here's kind of some of the work I've done on it. What do you guys think? They're like, yeah, we love it, or we don't love it. Or what about this, or what about that? And then you go, okay, I know the kind of research and learning I'm going to have to do.
Wow.
I think I've definitely, in my time, had professors who came across like they knew it all. And I think when you're young, that's kind of attractive in a way, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of comforting. You go, I've got all these questions. This person has all the answers. Let me
gather them up.
Let me find, right.
Like trustworthy.
Yeah. But then the longer you do this, wait a minute. If I don't have all the answers, that person didn't have all the answers. Or the thing you find when you're a parent is you realize your parents had no idea what they were doing because you have no idea what you're doing, right? Like you have a general set of ideas about what it means to raise kids. And some of that is, here's what my parents did that they did really well. I want to replicate that. Yeah. Here were the things they didn't do as well. I mean, sorry, mom and dad, but it's true. Right? Like facts. Right. I'm like, I'm sorry.
They're human, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I love my dad. My dad was one of those guys who didn't.
We love you, Father.
Right. Well, I love my dad. R.I.P. My father passed away a couple of years ago. So it gives me time to reflect, right? But like my dad was one of those guys who didn't tell us he loved us. That's just generationally. Like my dad loved us very much. He showed us. He had all these ways of doing it. But like Dad, it would have been nice to just say, I love you, son. I'm like, I love you too, Dad. So I told my son every day I love him.
Wow.
We were driving in the car yesterday. And I said, Teddy, do I tell you I love you enough or do you need more?
Wow.
And he goes, more. And I said, okay. And I tell him I love him like 10, 15 times a day.
Yeah.
Like he can anticipate when I'm going to tell him I love him. But like 15 is not enough, 20, 25, 30.
And now you're like, I want to hear it too.
Right. And he's good about it. He's like, I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. So a lot of that stuff. Right? A lot of kisses, a lot of hugs, But for me, it would have also been helpful for those people that I looked up to and valued if they would have also said, hey, Justin, these are really good questions. I don't have all the answers, but here's how I think we can approach it. So I think there's an authenticity that's really important, right? Where you go, if there are, like, because there's different kinds of information too, right? Like in what year did this happen? Okay, well, here's the year that we think it happened, and here's why. And those kinds of like really straightforward kind of informational kinds of questions. I'm like, yeah, I think we know that. Other things that are like more interpretational, like other things that the jury is still out on.
Right.
Own it. The jury's out. We don't know. Or here's what we think at this time. Or here's what we have thought, here's where we are now, and here's where I think we could be going. I think that kind of honesty is really important, especially for students, because if you project like you have all the answers, and that makes students feel like they need to have all the answers. And that's a lot of pressure to carry.
Yeah.
That is.
It's a lot of weight.
That's true.
It's a lot of weight. We may not think about it that way, but it's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
That is.
A little bit of like a wrap-up question.
Yeah.
So we know like it's impossible when you're taking a course.
Yeah.
You're not gonna memorize and like take everything you learn and like there's gonna be key things for the class you teach. What is like 1, 2, or maybe like 3 main points that you would want students out of everything that you taught them in the class for them to take with them?
Yep.
And either to apply or to know and to learn.
Great. All right. One of the first things is I want us to take seriously Jesus' humanity. Wow. In this class, I want us to take seriously Jesus' humanity. So we use this language, fully God and fully human, right?
Yes.
Right.
It drives me crazy because we say fully God and fully human, but our default setting is really kind of like God in a skin suit. Like Jesus is playing at being human. He's not really human. He's perfect. He's God. He doesn't live the life that we live, right? And because of that, we don't actually look at him as an example. We push past Jesus as an example for how to live our lives, and we look to other people who are broken and sinful. Even the apostles, wonderful people, broken, sinful people who fail, who get things wrong. Yeah. Peter, love Peter, denies Jesus 3 times, right? Okay. Peter and Paul can't agree about what to do with Gentiles, according to Scripture, right?
Right.
Peter gets called out by Paul. Paul says, hey, when there's no Jewish Christians around, you eat with the Gentiles all the time. The Jewish Christians show up and you shun the Gentile Christians. What's your problem? Okay. So when we take Jesus' humanity seriously, when we understand him, I could not love Jesus until I understood him as a human being. Not truly love him, not truly be in relationship with him. He was object of worship. He was other. He was exalted. He was God. He was God's son. When I understood him as a human being, opened up my whole world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay? Now I'm like,
come on.
I'm like, wait. So he understands what's going on experientially, not intellectually, not conceptually.
Wow.
He understands our lives because he lived this life.
Yes.
Dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not he's thought through this life.
Wow.
He's lived it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Really?
It's what connected me to this idea of God understands suffering both as suffering son and grieving father. And as a father who's lost a child, it connected me to God in a unique way because God could understand my suffering as a father who's lost a child. Right?
Yeah. Right.
And as the child who is suffering. So number 1, take Jesus' humanity seriously. Number 2, if we take Jesus' humanity seriously, how does that connect us to our discipleship? If Jesus is modeling for us in the Gospels what it means to be a disciple, then first, right, we're taking his humanity seriously. So he is the model. Then 2, what is he modeling? I don't need to come up with these crazy scenarios about what would Jesus do. What did Jesus do? What did he say? What did he do? Let's start there. Let's work on that, right? Let's not push past like these, well, you know, if Jesus were here, well, Jesus was here.
Yeah.
What did Jesus? Okay.
And that's funny. I've heard that a lot. I know there's
what did he do if he was here, right?
Wow.
And then the last thing probably would just be, again, kind of conceptually, be intentional in this process. Be intentional in this relationship. Our relationship with God is not accidental. The most meaningful, powerful, impactful relationships that we have in life, whether it's, friends, family, whatever, it's intentional. Like this thing you guys have going here. This is intentional, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? You purposefully get together, you come in, you talk, you plan, the three of you are sitting here doing this thing, right?
Not an accident.
Not an accident.
Definitely
right?
not. And
you
it's
didn't
not
just
a
happen to show up today, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Why is it that we want to happen to show up with our relationship with God?
So true.
Right? Well, God's everywhere. He's here all the time. That's true. Where are you? So our relationship with God has to be intentional. It's intentionally connected to our understanding of discipleship. Our understanding of discipleship is connected to the model for discipleship, which is Christ. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are three things. Like if you can
Start a church.
if you can leave my class kind of making,
We need to have a whole podcast series,
if you
guys.
can leave my class making like at least a couple of those connections, because I get, look, and part of it too, honestly, it's allowing yourself the process of reflecting back.
Yes.
You're not going to get this in 15 weeks. So here's the thing. Students get from me in 15 weeks what I've been working on for 25 years or more. She's going to bring it to you.
Or I'm going to go crash.
Right. Right.
And be an APU student
through,
for the next
pull up.
15 weeks.
Yeah, come up Friday.
Or she's going to come home, right? And you guys are going to talk and you're going to have a 15, 20, 30 minute, an hour long conversation. But she gets 15 weeks of this. You guys get an hour. So it's like 25 years to 15 weeks down to an hour.
hour.
Right. And then it's kind of like, well, how come I'm not getting all of this? Because you had an hour.
Wow.
How come I'm not getting all this? You've had 15 weeks.
How come disciples doubted? Because they
were trying to figure it out in the moment. well, look, they're trying to figure it, but that's the
They're
thing I
trying to
always come
figure it
back
out.
to. We've had 2,000 years to make sense of who Jesus is. And we go, how come Peter didn't get it? He had 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like, are you the one? Is this it?
Wow.
Should I be looking for anybody else? No. Are you sure? Yes. Are you really sure? Yeah, I'm really sure. I don't know. Right? And we look at him and go, well, why didn't you believe more? And I'm like, well, we've had 2,000 years for this story to be normative.
Wow.
And he's like, I'm trying to make life decisions
Wow.
right now. Yeah. So
Wow.
probably those three things.
And out of those three things, what is one thing that you'll say to everyone here watching right now? Go and watch this or read this book, or what is one thing you'll say?
Practical.
Actually go and be intentional and read this or watch this.
Honestly, I really want people to read the Gospels.
Okay.
I really do.
Wow.
I really do. I know this is crazy. It's a crazy thing to say. I think we know about the Gospels. We don't know the Gospels. We know about Jesus. We don't know Jesus.
Come on.
Most of our understanding of this is mediated through somebody else. And the somebody else's are not bad, right? Pastors, friends, others. What I really want to encourage people to do is to, try to gather together in reading communities. Read these with other people. Read these with trusted people. But read the text. See what's actually there.
Wow.
But honestly, I mean, like the proviso is be careful, read it with other people, read it with trusted sources. This is what church is for. It's what community is for. It's what friendship groups are for. We were talking before. Scripture was always intended to be read in community.
Yeah.
Right. So that we can read through it. We can talk through it. We can ask questions. I think the best Christians ask the best questions.
Yeah.
Ask questions, but do this with people you trust, but spend time in the Gospels. We're not going to know Jesus until we know what Jesus is saying and doing.
Yeah. The first thing that got me, okay, sorry, I know we need to close off, but the first thing that really shook me was when I heard that we were also fixated on the crucifixion, on the resurrection, on that piece.
Yeah.
But it starts from the minute he was born.
Yes.
That whole, yeah, when you...
Listen, all right. So one of the things I will say in class is, if Jesus came only to die on the cross, then why does he spend so much time healing, feeding, preaching, and teaching? Right? He spends way more of his life doing those things than dying on the cross.
Yeah.
The cross is a few hours, an incredibly important few hours. He spends years doing the other things. But we go, no, the cross is what matters. Like the cross is the culmination of the other things.
Yeah, I don't think Jesus would want us to just toss aside the rest of what he did.
Thank you.
From being conceived to...
I'm just saying, just thank you. And also, I think the writers of the Gospels would go, thank you. We spent a lot of time writing about all of the other stuff, and all everybody wants to talk about is the cross.
Yeah, they didn't just write he was perfect. Died on the cross. The end.
No.
John 3:16.
All of this is leading us to this culminating moment, right?
Wow.
If he's bringing the kingdom,
Yeah.
right? His coronation is with thorns. His being lifted up and presented to the people is not on a golden throne. It's on a cross, right? So if we're thinking about all of this sort of, as we're getting close to Easter, by the way, as we're thinking about all this stuff sort of leading up to this, that's the culmination, right? But I think about it from a school perspective. Graduation is not the whole of your educational career.
Right.
It's a really wonderful moment that brings this whole thing to its like logical conclusion, but it's all the work that you're doing up to that that gets you to that moment.
Yeah.
All the work that Jesus is doing up to this moment. Okay, I'm saying. So let's concentrate on that stuff too.
That is great.
Guys, we need a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
we need a
7,
series.
8, 9.
Like that's what
I'm
we
happy
need.
to come back. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Huh?
Yes.
Wow.
Please do, because honestly,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
I have no words.
I'm happy to come back. I'm happy to come back.
Like, how do you
Well-
Wednesday, Friday?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
For
Thank you
giving
for
us
having
the
me.
time.
Yeah.
Appreciate
The
it.
Thank you so
info,
much.
knowledge.
Thank you.
And guys, I mean, you guys,
You guys watching.
you've heard.
Literally.
You've
Come
heard
on.
you've heard what needed to be said, and I hope that a lot of these words had impact, and that anything that stuck out really you grab onto that and be intentional about it and see what happens, see how God can work in your life.
Well, Grace, also comment down below. We're going to have your email in there. So if you want to reach out.
Don't put my email in there.
Okay. No?
No, we'll see. We'll see.
I'm like,
Maybe contact information if you want to give him a little email.
I can be found on the website. It's easy. I mean, you can put it.
Okay. Website.
My email is readily found, so you can find it. Either
We'll do the
down below or
website.
whatever. We'll find it.
Website, if you want to like, hey, I have this question for you, or
he's busy.
he's also very busy, but I'm sure
I'll do my best.
Look, I'll be his assistant, so I got you.
Yeah. Send all your questions to
Yeah.
Cassie.
Send it to me, and then I'll say, But no, he is amazing.
Appreciate
He's so
it.
amazing.
No, God is amazing, and I'm just trying to let him work.
Yes.
How's
Yes.
that? God's amazing. I'm
Yes.
just trying to let him work.
No,
We're
we're
trying to let him work. We should all try to let him work
let him
through
work.
us.
Just let God cook. That's it.
Guys,
Yeah,
Look.
that's all we got to do.
This does all the talking. We should step
That's it.
Yeah.
to the side and understand it. Try to. Sometimes we're just accepting it, but hey.
You see how good this is? We just keep going, and we're like, we just want more
Yeah,
and more. We keep talking.
Guys,
somebody
sorry,
has to
I
do
said
Okay.
I'm saying this like you can the Bible. There's a Bible right there.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.